In the 10th edition of the W. James Potter textbook Media Literacy, the term media literacy is defined as a set of perspectives that we actively use to expose ourselves to the mass media to process and interpret the meaning of the messages we encounter. What that means in a nutshell is that the more we can understand the media at large and how it works, the better we can understand what messages that a given media is attempting to push us. Becoming more literate in media aids us in deciphering what is real and important versus what is fabricated or what a given media product or company wants us to think, buy, or do. We as people, or bunnies, build our perspectives and literacy on our past experiences. For example, say you bought a can of soup and after trying it you decide you don't really like it. Then, later on, you see a commercial for that same soup and it says it's the best soup in the world. You, because you already tried it, know that you don't really like it. So you're not going to buy another can no matter what the commercial says. But somebody who hasn't tried the soup before might be swayed to buy a can by that commercial. After all, it does claim that it's the best soup in the world. So if it's our past experience that shapes media literacy, that doesn't bode very well for the members of our society that don't really have a lot of experience to go on. Children are especially susceptible then to media messages because of their lack of experience, and media companies know this. It seems that every toy commercial out there claims their product to be better than all the others, and kids lap that up. Even worse, with the increasing presence of children and teens on social media and the increasingly polarizing and politically laced content on social media platforms, media companies are now able to influence kids' futures, crafting their behaviors and political views into whatever fits their model best. Because of this, it has become increasingly more important to make sure children are media literate earlier on. That way, they can better sift through the media noise they'll inevitably be exposed to. Since I want this video to be understood by the most amount of people possible, I'm going to be using more simplistic language to describe the fundamental concepts when studying the media and imparting media literacy than what's talked about in the textbook I mentioned earlier. For the sake of inclusion though, I'm going to quickly go over what the textbook refers to as the 7 skills of media literacy, as that's really what we're trying to teach here. I don't think knowing the specific terms really helps with general understanding though, so if you want to skip this part, go to the timecode on screen now. The textbook I mentioned earlier describes the 7 skills as number 1, analysis, the ability to break down a message into its key components. Number 2, evaluation, comparing a message to some standard through which to judge its value. Number 3, grouping, comparing elements to see which are similar and which are different from one another. Number 4, induction, inferring a pattern across a set of elements, then generalizing the pattern to all elements in the set. Number 5, deduction, using general principles to explain particulars. Number 6, synthesis, assembling elements into a new structure. And number 7, abstraction, that is, creating a new description to capture the essence of a message in less words than the message itself. Weirdly enough, a good example for these skills, especially that last one, can be found in the 1988 sci-fi action film They Live. Basically, the whole film is about a guy learning to understand the hidden messages behind the media he's exposed to every day. Really interesting stuff. I have a limited amount of time in this video, so I can't really go into detail on the skills, but there are plenty of other videos you can watch, and I highly encourage you to do so. And if you're more of a reader, W. James Potter, the guy who wrote the textbook from earlier, also wrote another book conveniently titled The 7 Skills of Media Literacy. Okay, back to the video. Some of the more pressing topics in regards to kids' media literacy are commercial media, sponsored content, media representation, and fake news, which is a term we've been hearing a lot more in recent years and probably the most important section in the video, so I'd watch to the end for that. Commercial media is just what the name implies. Commercials and advertisements. That is, anything designed to sell you something or push a product. I already spoke briefly on how susceptible kids are to advertising earlier, and I'm also running out of time in the video, so for this section I'll just read off a quote from page 323 of the Media Literacy textbook. If you want children to learn that certain content is harmful to them, you need to avoid simply telling them that. Instead, you need to help them analyze the content and see for themselves the silliness, the manipulation, or the harm. We as adults have a responsibility to teach children what we know about the tactics ad companies utilize in order to get us to buy into their products. Referring back to that example I gave earlier, children might see that best soup in the world advertisement and believe it at face value instead of realizing just how many other soups also claim to be the same. And just like the quote says, we with the experience have to show them just how silly these manipulation tactics are. Then hopefully they'll be able to see the silliness in other types of advertisements too. Unfortunately, some advertisements and manipulation tactics are a lot more difficult to spot. Sponsored content, which is one of those, refers to a type of advertising where the advertiser will pay a content producer money in order to promote their product. Sponsored content can appear anywhere from radio to television, journal publications, there's even a lot of it here on YouTube too. Sometimes these advertisements are disguised as the content producer's normal content, so it's almost impossible to spot unless you already know what you're looking for. Luckily though, with recent regulations on advertising in the media, content producers are now legally required to disclose whether any given content they produce was sponsored or not. Here on YouTube, that means we get a little message that pops up in the corner. Since regulations are already helping us spot sponsored versus unsponsored content now, the important thing in regards to children is teaching them what sponsored content is, as well as helping them see the silliness in this type of advertising too. Representation in the media, whether that be race, gender, body image, community, or anything else really, can also play a huge role in how children see the world and themselves. Negative representation in the media, such as hate speech or defamation, can lead a child to accepting those representations into their own beliefs and having their behavior altered as a result. Even seemingly positive representations can have negative effects. For example, beauty standards in advertising can invoke serious self-image issues if a child perceives that they themselves don't fit within those standards. To use myself as an example, I still get self-conscious and have self-doubts because of how I don't fit the classic model of masculinity that's promoted as the standard here in the United States, even though I know that what's depicted in advertising isn't realistically achievable. Nor do I even actually want to be like that. Which just goes to show how ingrained into our beliefs these representations can become. Again, children don't have the knowledge set we do, so we have to show them how to spot harmful content and see for themselves how little that content matters. To go back to that quote from earlier, we need to help them analyze the content and see for themselves the silliness, the manipulation, or the harm. We need to teach them that the way the media represents things isn't always accurate. I'd like to start off this last section with a clarification. There is no such thing as fake news, and there never can be. News, by definition, is a report on facts and events as they happened, and facts can't be fake, otherwise they wouldn't be facts, and the news reporting on them wouldn't be news. The term is misleading, and could itself even be considered an advertisement against trusting the news, which would be a powerful tool to any media companies wanting to push their own agenda instead. But I'm getting ahead of myself. What the term fake news actually refers to is something I'm going to refer to as manufactured media, which is a term I just made up off the top of my head, so hopefully nobody else has already used it. Manufactured media is any non-factual or processed media that spreads misinformation under the guise of being real or factual, whether that was the intention or not. Sometimes media companies will even take real news stories and process or frame them in such a way as to make the facts or outcome appear different to what they really are. This type of manufactured media can be especially difficult to discern for both children and adults alike. So what can we do? The best way to combat the spread of manufactured media is to take everything we see with a grain of salt. Once you see something online or on TV, take a moment to ask yourselves, is what I'm seeing really true? Then look up what you're seeing to check if there are any other sources that can corroborate the story, or especially check if any sources contradict the story. One good way to fact check the stories you see is through independent news organizations, which aren't owned by any major media company or political party, and therefore have no incentive to do any agenda pushing. Usually. And that's all the time I have. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something. Or if not, I hope you at least enjoyed the video. And of course, I highly encourage you to do your own research after watching this if you want to learn more. In the description below, I also included a list of sources that help me understand this topic, so if you are interested, go check those out too. If you'll excuse me, I still need to make breakfast. So I will see you later.
I'm okay.